3 days ago, there were knocks on the front door of my apartment, quite unexpectedly for me, who, roughly speaking, is constantly sitting at home and absolutely never waits for anyone, or at least waits only for those who previously called me and informed me about the visit. My neighbors are, let's say, not very talkative, and to make it more or less clear, my entrance was mostly inhabited by pensioners. Well, there were several apartments where ordinary average families lived. I mean 40 to 50-year-old parents and their moronic teenage children running around the entrance like horses. Obviously, neither parents nor children were interested in my personality. I rented the apartment. Willy-nilly I had to take a place there, because there were no other options. And, frankly speaking, the apartment seems to be normal. Thank God there is hot water. It's warm inside, and the internet connection is available. That's all I need for life. I've been living here for almost a year now. I've never had any unpleasant things happen, although how can they happen if I mostly sit at home, work from home, and my entire range of interest is on an old table and a laptop on it. As for the knocks, the first time was in the evening 2 days ago. I had just returned from the store and slammed the door with my foot, as my hands were full. Literally less than a minute had passed. I didn't really have time to take off my jacket. There was a knock at the door. I thought at first it was just my imagination, but after a moment, it was repeated. Who could it be? I thought to myself, and looked through the peephole. To my surprise, there was no one on the staircase. Through the peephole, I saw nothing but white-green walls and a dim light bulb under the ceiling. Or maybe it was imagination? I muttered with surprise in my voice, dragging full bags of food into the kitchen. I usually buy products for a long time. Well, for a really long time. For a couple of weeks for sure, so that I wouldn't go out once again. Well, yes, I'm some kind of a homebody. I am who I am. While I was sorting everything into the cabinets and the refrigerator, the knock was heard again. What the fuck is this? I rushed into the hallway and looked through the peephole again. Speaking of the peephole, I will make a short digression now. From my earliest childhood, I was always taught to look through the peephole before opening the door. Or, when I was very small, to ask who was there. Well, my parents taught me, but it went in one ear and out the other, until my father once scared me so much that I almost peed in my pants. I opened the door without asking who was there, and he sharply shouted at me. I jumped back, and it was since then that I got into the habit, even if I knew who should come, and he rings or knocks on the door. I always looked through the peephole, and this time I also looked, although there was a desire to quickly open the door and impose a good obscenity on the one who was playing around at the entrance. But in the peephole, I saw a neighbor. This granny lives opposite me. Turning the key, I opened the door. "Good evening," I said. "Hello," she replied. "Did you knock on the door about 10 minutes ago?" "No, I have just come out with a banal neighbor's request," she said, smiling. "Salt?" I smiled. "No, a glass of flour. Can I borrow it from you? I decided to make some pancakes, but I didn't have enough for the dough." "Of course. One moment." I went into the kitchen, filled her glass with flour, and handed it to the neighbor. "Thank you so much. I was already thinking about going to the store. I'll treat you to pancakes." "Oh, come on." The door slammed shut, and I went to continue packing the remaining products on the shelves. Then everything was as usual. Laptop, food, internet, and usually at 2 a.m. I'm already half asleep going to the shower, and then to bed. But it was different that night. Just about 2 o'clock in the morning, there was another knock on the door from the hallway. I turned my head in that direction and listened carefully. Suddenly, the knock was repeated. I looked up at the clock, standing behind. Damn, it's almost 2 o'clock in the morning? Madder than hell, I got up from my chair and rushed into the hallway. I looked through the peephole, and there was nobody. Still, I didn't open the door. I understood that there was no point. Even if these were local teens, then most likely I wouldn't catch up with them. As expected, there was no one on the staircase. Oh, tomorrow there will be a hard talk with your ancestors, I thought to myself, and went back to the room. I was enraged, so in order to calm down, I decided to take a shower. But it was only when I was standing under a hot stream of water that I thought, there were certainly knocks on the door, but I would have also heard the footsteps of the children running away. I can't say that I have the best sound insulation in the door. I would have heard quick steps on the entrance, maybe even cheerful shouts and laughter. But this wasn't the case. Was there an invisible someone knocking? Ghost? This is illogical. These were only some of my thoughts. In fact, I was standing under the shower and reasoned what was logical and what was not, probably for 20 minutes. Only then, deciding that I would solve all of this the next day, I was ready to fall asleep. Perhaps there was a knock on the door, but I didn't hear it because of the murmur of the water. During the rest of the night, I didn't hear any more knocks. The next day, I spared no time and nerves in order to go to the house management so that they would have put a normal intercom as soon as possible, or at least repaired the old one. It stopped working a little less than a month ago. Either it was too old, or drunk neighborhood children broke it. At first, as is customary in our state, they began to shift all the work to others, but not in my case. I am a very calm person by nature, but when something brings me out, I won't stop until I achieve my goal. And after a scandal and obscenities, I was driving home with a peasant named Grigori. What a strange name. That's right, they have allocated a worker who is going to repair our intercom right now. Of course, I did it for the common good, so that all sorts of freaks didn't run into our entrance, didn't drink, didn't sing their stinking rap, and didn't knock on the doors of anyone. How stupid I was then. I didn't understand that there was a much more interesting thing behind those night knocks. I drove the worker to her house. They rarely use their cars, which are always occupied by other workers, or just being repaired at a service station. Of course, there's public transport, but still, Grigori remained at the entrance door while I slowly climbed to my floor. It was a long day. I was driving back and forth. I was arguing. The master was fixing the intercom. A lot of time passed, and the evening was slowly approaching. Soon, Grigori came to me, warning that he had already finished, made a test call, and really the intercom was working. Of course, I gave him a little tip, for efficiency, so to say. I had a day off planned today, having provided for this. I took a couple of cans of beer and some snacks yesterday. I sat in front of the TV all evening. I relaxed a little when suddenly the intercom rang. It was the ear-splitting annoying sound that many are familiar with. I wasn't waiting for anyone, so instead of answering, I dropped it. But I didn't even have time to take a step back into the room as the ringing reached my ears again. Now I couldn't stand it anymore. I pressed the button and it was keeping silent. I could only hear some kind of hiss. "Hello," I said irritably. In response, silence. "Hello," I repeated it. Nothing has changed. After that, I returned to the sofa. Maybe Grigori did something wrong there, or maybe he decided to take revenge on me, so that after a while the calls began to annoy me one after another for the fact that I tore him away from doing nothing. I don't think so. We communicated well when I drove him here by car. After about 10 minutes, the intercom rang again. "What on earth is this?" I said in a loud voice, and again I had to get up from the sofa and go to the intercom. "Hello," I shouted. "What the fuck are you calling here for, you freak?"
I'll call the police now. And then you'll call your parents from the police station, you idiot.
The hiss was not the only thing heard. I could hear breathing now, and it was hoarse, as if a person had been smoking for 100 years. Without hanging up the phone, I rushed to the window in the kitchen, from which you can see the entrance and everything that is nearby very well. Although the terrace covered more than half of the view, still I managed to see that there was someone standing at the entrance door. I could only see his legs, and when I opened the window, I could clearly hear the pressing of the buttons on the intercom and the bell ring again in my apartment. This really infuriated me, and being a little bit drunk, I picked up the phone and shouted to him,
"Well, what do you want? Why the fuck are you calling me and not saying anything?"
And I heard a faint sound on the phone. "Let me in."
Yeah? Well, that's not gonna happen. We put the intercom in order for people like you not to come in the entrance.
I rudely finished our conversation, and literally, immediately after my words, a strong blow was heard on the metal entrance door. It was so powerful that I heard a sound through the still open window in the kitchen and in the entrance. It spread all the way to the 5th floor. I rushed up to the window. He was still standing at the entrance. Taking out my phone from my pocket, I called the police and explained the whole situation. They said they would send a patrol. Then I thought that they would come now, pack that idiot and take him away. But it didn't happen like that. I looked at him and thought, well, it seems like a person is standing, but how strong he should be to hit the door that way. Soon there was another blow of about the same force. I just saw him standing there and swinging. No, this isn't an ordinary teenage fool who needs to warm up at the entrance. I realized that something was wrong when I heard the door open in front of my apartment. I rushed to the peephole and saw a sleepy neighbor throwing on a jacket several sizes larger than herself, going down the stairs, apparently to sort it out. At that moment, I felt like a bedwetter or something. A woman goes to deal with a night hooligan, and I'm sitting at home and calling the police. But it was still the right choice not to come out. I went back to the kitchen for the umpteenth time and looked out the window. I heard the door open and then a woman screamed. It was so heartbreaking, as if she had seen the fear of her whole life there at the entrance. But perhaps it was so. The squeal was short. Then I saw some kind of scuffle under the roof of the terrace. I understood this by the shadows and by the specific sounds. And after that, the neighbor fell out the door to the entrance, her mouth wide open. I recoiled from the window in horror. My palms were covered with sweat in an instant, and it began to sting unpleasantly in the back. The woman was probably dead. My heart was pounding furiously, and at one moment, its beats coincided with a knock on my front door. I already knew who was banging on the door. There was no desire to open it. The knocks on the door increased, and the one who was on the other side of it understood that I was there. Each time he knocked harder and more insistently, from which the fear slowly took control of my mind.
What does he want from me? Why is he banging on my door?
I was terrified. With small, quiet steps, wandered into the room and hid in the closet, closing the nasty creaking door behind me. The night guest knocked for some time and stopped. Instead, I heard a knock on the window in my room. I was still sitting in the closet. Yes, it was the knock on the window that puzzled me. 2nd floor. It's not so high, but still, we have such a house that there are no pipes outside, or any other hooks. Just a smooth brick wall, and even the roof of the terrace is at a decent distance. He couldn't jump on it and climb up to me. Well, it's impossible. The knocks continued, but they were also quite strong. They weren't knocks, but it's better to say blows. But thank God the owner shortly before my arrival put a good, not the cheapest double-glazed window. The next few minutes of sitting in the closet turned into a real nightmare because my leg was numb and I involuntarily moved. The door opened a little, just an inch. Nevertheless,
A thin crack was enough for my head that my whole body was almost paralyzed from the animal horror that in 1 second was instilled in me by the one who knocks on my window from the street. It was unclear how he was holding onto the wall. It had no face. His bald head was covered with gray skin, although it looked more like a fucking film, and he was banging his head against the glass. By the way, it had already begun to crack. Where are the police? Where are they? Why did they take so long to drive? I sat and shivered as if I had spent a couple hours in the fridge. The horror that began to happen further doesn't lend itself to any explanation. I was scared to death, decided to get out of the closet, and run away from here. In those seconds, my brain wasn't thinking clearly, and instead of staying here and breaking up so that not one soul alive and inanimate wouldn't enter, I opened the closet door, ran towards the hallway, opened the door, and he was already standing there. I almost fell off my feet when I saw him on the staircase. The horror that I felt at that moment I just can't put into words, and he was standing like a mannequin, raising his hands a little as if he was waiting for me. How did he manage to get here so quickly? That's just impossible. I jumped back and slammed the door with a loud bang, and only then did I realize that my door was made of wood, and only one blow of this bastard will make it open wide. It began to bang and knock on the door, as it hadn't yet knocked. Strong blows rained down one after another, and I realized that the door wouldn't stand for a long time, and a voice coming from the entrance and passing through the cracks of the door and door frame crashed into my ears along with the blows. In a thin and at the same time rough voice, it muttered, "Open the door for me. Open it quickly. Open the door. Let me in." His voice sent legions of goosebumps marching all over my body. From head to heels, before my eyes was his image. In the entrance I saw him now knocking on my door, and imagined what would happen to me when he broke in here. I stood and prayed that the police would come in as soon as possible, that this would all be over. But it all ended a little differently. Loud knocks on my door were heard not only by me, but also by the other residents of my entrance, and best of all, on the floor. I heard the neighbor's door opening again. There we had a lonely old man who loved fishing, a good drink, and a snack more than his wife and children. These are my assumptions. I have repeatedly seen him with friends in the yard, in fishing clothes and with a bottle of spirits. As soon as he opened the door, the knocking on my door abruptly stopped. Then the screaming sounded, and gathering all my strength into a fist, I opened the door and glimpsed how it was dragging either a dead or disabled old man into his own apartment. I started running as I had never run before in my life. I ran for a very long time, very quickly. It was cold outside, and despite wearing only slippers and a t-shirt, I didn't feel cold. I just ran away from the nightmare that I was lucky enough to see today. I ran until I was completely exhausted and met a police car driving, as it turned out later, just to my house. When I arrived at the entrance, I felt sick, cold, and insanely scared. But fortunately, armed people in uniform calmed me down a little. When we got out of the car, we found nothing but 2 corpses, and then a sleepless night, a whole horde of police experts, surveys of neighbors, including me, and so on. And in the morning there were 2 coffin lids standing in the entrance. There would have been a third if I hadn't run away. I was repeatedly called to the police. I told everything as it really was, that he banged on my door, only I lied about who exactly came. They would have put me in a madhouse, and that would be the end. I decided to move out of this apartment like any normal person. I won't tolerate another visit, both physically and mentally. I took the English leave, without saying a word to anyone. It was rude on my part, but I wasn't thinking about that at the time. That terrible, vile voice and constant request to open the door and let him in were still spinning in my head.